likes it here in Britain instead. But if the Quran's done properly, it could create a good society. During the golden age of Islam, which ended 700 years ago, but during the golden age of Islam, the Muslim world was the most advanced place on the planet. Best universities, advances in mathematics, astronomy, science and biology. But the golden age of Islam ended and they stopped following their Quran. They followed corrupt religious leaders instead, and they've stagnated. Meanwhile, the rest of the world's going ahead.
See, he's talking about corrupted leaders in Middle East. But he knows he's a leader, Netanyahu, has been in power for 20 years. He's a prime minister for
13 years.
19 years.
And you're allowed to, because there's no law, there's no limit. There's no limit on how long you can be prime minister. So if he gets democratically elected, that's fine. I love democracy. If they want to vote for the same person again and again, why should I be against the people who vote for
You
him?
don't believe democracy against your religion?
Democracy is not against the religion.
Against your religion? You don't believe it?
In Judaism, the word democracy does not appear. But he'll make it up and pretend that Judaism is against democracy. They make things up. Oh, that sounds good, I'll say that. Pathetic. Anyway, whatever religion you've got.
Alright, I haven't finished my answer, but you talking.
Hundreds of Russian military vehicles, like tanks, transport, all kinds of things, and planes and helicopters have been lost. And this brings me to the second point of the Russians. So the first point, they say, oh, it was goodwill, it was a show of goodwill, we retreated because we wanted to show goodwill to the Ukrainians, which I disprove because, you know, they kept attacking Mariupol when they were winning. The second option the Russians also went for is that they did a tactical retreat. And that tactical retreat happened because the attack on Kiev was only a distraction. Now this point is even worse than the first point because nobody does a distraction where they lose thousands of troops, hundreds of military vehicles, and gain basically nothing. It's less than nothing. They got a humiliating defeat. Their atrocities were shown at Bucha. The amount of people they slaughtered there, the amount of people they shot in the back of the head. I think the evidence is all there. I think the satellite images are there. I think there's already been investigations there. Now, again, I like to give this example. I like to compare the accusations Russians make of the Ukrainian side and what the Ukrainians say that the Russian did to the Ukrainians. On one side, imagine this, there's two men standing here, one of them stabs the other in front of every single one of us. He stabs the other and says, no, it was that guy who stabbed him. Now, we all saw that he stabbed the guy. We all seen it. It's kind of clear that he did it, but innocent until proven guilty. There still needs to be a court case. He needs to be prosecuted. He needs to be declared guilty in the court. We can't just put him in jail or kill him without, jailing him, without trying him. You know what I mean? On the other side, imagine that this group of people walks in a room where there's a dead corpse. And one of the guys said, it was that guy over there who killed him. It's a lot less clear who actually did it, because we didn't see the act, there's less proof, simply put. Now, both cases, there needs to be a court case, there needs to be a trial, and there needs to be a decision. So, again, innocent until proven guilty.
I think it's quite obvious whether it's true or not, that it's fog of war, as you say,
Oh, of course,
you throw up stories, you make people scared, you win public opinion, the war is also an internet and information war, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%.
You're citing stats about deaths, tanks and so on. I haven't gone into those stats, I don't know one way or another. Actually, to be honest with you, although at the beginning I thought to myself, I'll try and follow carefully what's going on, it became such a vast distinction and such a vast quantity of information coming out. I just took the attitude, I'm not going to sit here like fiddling over every single case, nor am I going to accept any of the stories as true. I mean, you might say that's
your choice.
Close my eyes and close my ears, but at the same time, I just feel it gives me a bit more objectivity to look at what's going on, because I just can't go for, they're all dead, the Russians killed them. you know, with all the sort of phrases, you know, allegedly killed, or you know what I mean, butcher a butcher, you know. There's a certain point which you have to say. I mean, for me, what's the motivation?
Fine, I get your point.
Why would they do that? I'm not saying they couldn't do it.
Because
why?
Let me explain why would they do that. And I need to explain this by giving an example of them doing a similar thing in the past. First of all, the Soviet army was very well known by everyone to commit a lot of atrocities. Now, fair point, the Germans committed a lot of atrocities in World War II. Yes, Second World War. Second World War, yeah, that's what I meant. Second World War, the Germans committed a lot of atrocities. Then the Soviets went to Germany and they committed very similar atrocities to the Germans. They committed rapes, pillages, killings in Berlin when they took Berlin. Now, fair enough that the Germans committed a lot of bad things, horrible things. But still, the Americans didn't make any of that the Soviets did when the Americans came there. The British didn't commit any of those atrocities that the Soviets committed. That's the first point. Second point, a lot closer to us, the situation of Chechnya, of the Chechnya war. When the Russians started getting bombed, when their convoys started getting destroyed by the Chechen fighters, by the Chechen warriors, you know, who were giving a very strong fight against the Russian troops, Putin, who was in charge back then, by the way, this is something funny. Before Putin was in power, the previous Russian president did not do anything about Chechnya. They just kind of had a hands-off relation with Chechnya. When Putin came in charge, he immediately went, oh, okay, we gotta put them down. He sent troops to Chechnya, and when they started suffering losses to the Chechens, they completely leveled Grozny to the ground. They shelled it out of existence. Exactly, it's their way of fighting. It's their way of fighting to scare the population that they're attacking into submission.
Pulverize.
To inflict, pulverize them. To inflict so many losses, so much death and destruction and atrocities upon the population that you're attacking, so that they get so scared, they're like, oh man, I don't want to be exterminated. And it's okay, I'll be with you, just don't kill me, please. And that's exactly what they're doing in Ukraine. Look at Mariupol. Very similar situation to Grozny. Vast parts of the city, it's a bigger city than Grozny. It's a far bigger city with a vaster population. And a lot of its part was completely leveled to the ground. Let's look at Kharkiv. Very similar situation. And Bucha, again, I'm almost done. And Bucha is again part and parcel of this terror warfare. You kill people, you exterminate people, you execute people in front of each other, you make people scared, you make people afraid, you make them feel hopeless in the situation, and they resign, and there you go, you got victory. You know what I mean? That's their way of doing things. It's as simple as that.
So how does the West supplying vast amounts of high-grade weapons help to hinder the deaths?
Very good question. It helps.
Or is it possible that it really exacerbates and extends the whole process?
Well, if it weren't for the supply of the West, of the weapons by the West, Ukrainians would not be able to put a good fight at all. It's with the javelins, with the endloads, with the Bayraktars.
Take a hypothetical. Let's say the West had not sent any weapons, and Russia had conquered Kiev, conquered the other parts of the country. How would Ukrainians' response, how successful do you think they'd be in undermining the Russians as an occupier?
The Ukrainians would have to
the question is, would some kind of passive resistance or some kind of appeal to the ordinary soldiers not be more effective than more and more weapons in the hand of a standing army backed by NATO?
Passive resistance has been proven to be absolutely futile against Russia. And we can see that with the Russian protests. They have been put down with brute force. They went there, they beat up the people who were protesting, they jailed them, some of them for 10 years, for just speaking against the government. And it's legit, you can see that that's the law they passed right now. Passive resistance is impossible against Russia.
But in the countries that were occupied by the former Soviet Union, so mainly the Russian army, there were Ukrainians, others there, they were able to drive out the Russians.
Not quite.
So is it, okay, not perfectly, the Russians withdrew, but I think the idea of a Russian occupation, that's what my position was at the beginning.
I see.
If the Russians occupy Ukraine, if nothing was done, and then people started protesting
there would be less
non-stop.
deaths if the Ukrainians were occupied,
Yes,
and they started
and they didn't get all the
resisting
weapons
against
from
the
the West.
Russians.
Yes.
But I disagree with that. That will be a lot worse for the Ukrainians than it is now. I'll explain you why. So I'll give you a few examples why that kind of resistance against Russia is ineffective. Because you know Maidan, right? The Maidan protests, blah blah blah. The pro-Russian puppet governor in Ukraine, Yanukovych, started, having his thugs shoot the protesters. and the
That's
protesters.
disputed, but anyway, go on.
Well, he was put
It
in.
is disputed, but
It's
but that's
disputed.
your view of
It's
it.
disputed by Putin. It's not
Not just by
disputed
Putin.
by
It's not just by
people. Fair enough. Look, you can say that, but it's been kind of proven at this point. Now, I can give you a similar situation to that. Ukrainians actually succeeded in their rebellion against the pro-Russian puppet. The same situation happened in Belarus to Lukashenko. They attempted the same situation, but they were put down because Russian troops quickly were sent
I'm glad you're
to
not denying it anymore. Well done.
Guys, come on. Get a room, guys, get a room. Get a room already.
Concentrate on what you're doing.
I am. I'm very concentrated. Anyway,
I'm glad you're now
coming back to the point. In Belarus, they were not able to do the same thing because Russian troops were immediately sent to to Minsk and to Belarus, and they immediately put down any kind of rebellion. It's common knowledge at this point. Same in Kazakhstan. In Kazakhstan, they were trying to put down their Russian-controlled puppet, and in Almaty, Russian troops invaded them quickly and put them down. So peaceful protests, peaceful attempts to change the Russian puppet presidents have failed in Kazakhstan and Belarus, and in Ukraine they only succeeded because the Ukrainians were the first ones who tried, and I think that the Russians weren't able to deploy as much force to Ukraine, and also because Ukraine, fair enough, I have to say this, Ukraine has been more independent from Russia than Belarus and Kazakhstan. Belarus and Kazakhstan have been part of this trade union with Russia. They've been They've been having closer relations with Russia. That needs to be said. So Ukraine was a little bit more independent and had higher chances of succeeding in its insurrection against this.
At what point does it end? So this guy Mersheimer, I'm sure you're familiar with him. He said Mersheimer, he's like an American realist professor, yeah, and he said NATO is prepared to fight. America basically is prepared to fight in Ukraine to the last Ukrainian blood.
Ah, I heard that one.
Okay,
I heard that
so
one.
what do you make of that? Do you think that's
Yeah, but he's not a
nonsense?
deputy, he's an ex-deputy. He's no longer in charge. He's no longer in charge. This guy you're talking about.
No, he's a professor. He's an American professor. I'm sure other people have said the same thing. But essentially the point is, at what point of Western provision of resources for weapons to the Ukrainian fight against Russia, well, at what point does it become just the expenditure of Ukrainian lives in part of a geopolitical game?
So in stopping being a puppet for
I
Putin,
get the question,
yeah.
thank you. I get the question.
It's a
I don't need you
puppet.
to explain it
You're
to
going
me.
to be a puppet on the other side.
I get the question,
Yeah.
thank you. So look, first of all, it's funny that you mentioned this professor. I don't even remember his name, but I heard this example just yesterday about the last Ukrainian, or about or to the last drop of Ukrainian blood, something like that. Now, again, he's not somebody who calls any shots in America. He's just a random person. He's not the one who makes the law.
It's an observation.
It's an observation by a random person. I could say Putin is destroying Russia from within, and I think it's a veridic, it's a true statement. But it's a fair point, exactly. But I'm not somebody with enough authority to project my opinion on the global stage. You see what I mean? So what he says and what I say doesn't have a lot of meaning. It's just an observation. It's the same as if you said. I mean, you have a degree. You know.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with you, me saying something.
You're
I'm feeding
informed,
you.
I
Wait,
think.
well,
You could
discuss
say
it.
that, and it would have the same value as him saying it. What I mean is, he's not a deputy. It doesn't just because he says it doesn't mean that the American government has this idea. Now, fair enough. Look, I'll tell you
They're not-
something
but we know
about the
they're not
American
going to
government.
intervene, don't we?
raised an idea.
So if they're not going to intervene,
No, but I disagree
and
with
they're
this
just
idea.
going to send more and more weapons,
I disagree with this idea because this
Who's gonna
idea
die?
is that
There will be a
hold on.
point. There will
This
be a point.
this idea is that America is using Ukraine as a proxy war to put down Russia, and fair enough, I understand the point. And America has in its benefit to put down Russia, and the West has in its benefit to put down Russia. I agree with all of that, but and this is the thing that these people are missing. It's in the benefit of the Ukrainians to put Russia down too. So the Ukrainians chose this situation, and I chose it myself. And Ukrainians who are right now in Ukraine fighting, they chose not to be overcome by Russia, not to have to, obey Russian rule and Russian authoritarian regime. They chose to fight for their freedom and fight for their right to exist as a separate country.
I understand
So I
that.
think it's.
But
Wait,
how
let
much-
me just finish.
sorry,
I'm
how
almost
much
done.
fire do you want
I
to put
promise,
on it?
I'm almost done. I'm almost done.
blood?
I'm almost done. I'm almost done. So it's not a question whether or not Ukraine is being manipulated by the West. It's a question of what are the common objectives of the US and of Ukraine. And it just so happens that in this case we have a common objective. to win the war against Russia. You see what I mean?
How many deaths, how much weapons is too much? At what point do you say we're not going to keep providing
You're making
weapons?
a false
I'm just asking you. I'm not making
no,
a conclusion.
hold on. You're
I'm
making a
asking you.
loaded question this time, Tycho, because you're saying you're implying that the more weapons are sent to Ukraine, the more Ukrainians will die. And I see your point. I see what you mean there. But Ukrainians would die either way. Ukrainians would be oppressed. There would be grievous prosecutions in Ukraine, grievous political, complete cleansings of political dissidents and of any kind of pro-Ukrainian ideals in Ukraine. Ukraine would stop existing as a separate country. It will have a complete and utter cultural genocide perpetrated on the Ukrainians in Ukraine. The Ukrainians said, no, we're not going to go that way. We prefer to fight. Some will die, but we will fight for what we have now, for our country, for our ability to say no. We will live by according to our own laws, not according to what Putin forces us to do. You see what I mean? So that's the disagreement we have in this situation. I think the weapons that the West is sending to Ukraine is very good news for the Ukrainians, because they're actually being able to beat back Russia in the northern front, and are being able to shift the tide of this war in their favor at this moment. I think at this moment the war is going in favor of the Ukrainians. Now I know the Russians have still a lot of troops, but the Russians cannot produce any more high-tech military. Their production sites have closed. Why is that? Because of the sanctions. Because sanctions from countries like Taiwan, for example, do not provide Russia with the high-tech stuff they need to build their high-tech equipment, like tanks and planes. So Russia is being pressed for a lot of different sides. And what Ukraine has to do is to keep grinding down the Russian military machine until it can no longer function cohesively. And as I mentioned with the oligarchs getting killed by Putin, poisoned by his regime, there's already dissidents in Russia right now. Abramovich was poisoned not long ago, and he's one of the richest oligarchs and most famous oligarchs in Russia. You see what I mean?
Yeah, they say.
Okay,
I don't know.
we're going a little bit on a tangent now. I'm pretty sure it's been proven that Abramovich was poisoned, but you can disagree about that. And yeah, look, about your opinion of the situation in Ukraine, you're just, taking a bit of a neutral, you're stepping back from it. I actually respect that position. I have nothing against it. I think it's much better to just step back and not do anything about it for people who have these kinds of opinions like yours about the war, than to start supporting the opposite side and to start working against the Ukrainian government. So, either support Ukraine or just stay out of the way. I think that's the best way to go. Huh?
I don't support either.
Just
put a
stay
neutral
out of the way,
hand.
then it's fair enough. It's
Alright,
no
see you
problem.
later.
See you later. But yeah, I mean, look, again,
We are neutral.
not sure.
I am neutral. 10 seconds.
10 seconds, go on.
Pablo, thank you very much for
worries.
allowing me this opportunity to interview you. As normal, it was great, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. But if you give your microphone to Dust, he will be the next interviewee. And what I'm doing, I'm just talking to people.
Okay, my
but
friend.
the next interview, you don't have the Holy Ghost. Everyone will be Dust.
There we go.
Good luck.
When you said that, what did I say? Can you? No, I didn't. What I was saying.